Number 10, Hawkeye. In the MCU's Avengers in 2012, Hawkeye betrayed the Avengers by being brainwashed by Loki. Loki knew that having Hawkeye with him was valuable, and he could access many of the secrets that S.H.I.E.L.D. was hiding. Hawkeye launched an attack on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier that the Avengers so happened to be on so he could free Loki. He takes out one of the propeller systems on the helicarrier and invades it with his team. Hawkeye and Black Widow fight, with her hoping to free him from the spell. In the end, he's able to fight the spell because Black Widow hit him really hard in the head and was able to gain back control of his own mind. Number 9, Hank Pym. In the Avengers issue 213, Hank Pym received a court-martial for how he handled the situation in a fight with the Avengers. He definitely was not in a good place at the time and was a complete wreck. He still wanted to be a part of the Avengers team and wasn't ready to be forced off of it. He decided to design a robot that would attack him during the trial. The catch was that since he designed it, he knew how to easily defeat it. His wife, the Wasp, was completely against Hank doing this, but he didn't care. He told her to keep it a secret, and in the end, the Avengers did find out about the truth about Hank's plan and took him off the team. Number 8, Moondragon. In the comics, Moondragon has very strong mind control abilities, like telepathy and telekinesis. So when she stumbles upon a planet with the people of that planet ready for war, she wants to help them. She doesn't want these people to suffer over what will eventually happen if the war is to start: death. So she decides to control the entire race of people on this planet with her mind control powers to stop fighting. But she didn't just stop there. She went even further and made sure that the people of this planet would even worship her. She even wants to continue to do this throughout the universe. The Avengers find out, she brainwashes Thor to fight them, and she's later defeated and gets a device from Odin that dampens her powers to stop her from doing this ever again. Number 7, Sentry. Sentry is one of, if not the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. He was recruited by Steve Rogers to be a part of the new Avengers. Unfortunately, Sentry is not fully good. It does in fact have a little dark side of his personality called the Void. In a sense, the Void is the total opposite of Sentry, and regardless of all the good Sentry accomplishes, the Void can quickly undo that with his chaos. Norman Osborn basically manipulated and used Sentry for his own agenda and got him to join the Dark Avengers, where he helped destroy Asgard and kill Loki as the Void. Thor was quite unhappy about this and ended up killing Sentry, but no one stays dead long in the comics and he was later brought back to life. Number 6, Scarlet Witch. In Avengers Disassembled, Scarlet Witch goes crazy, all due to the fact that she really just wanted to have children who were real. But since she was with someone who was artificial, that wasn't really possible. But that didn't stop her from creating them. She used her powers to create the children that she always wanted to have. But what drove her mad was the fact that the children weren't technically real, and she couldn't stop thinking about that. She then basically uses her powers to tear the Avengers apart by making their lives complete hell, basically killing Hawkeye, Tony costing the Avengers a deal with the UN because he was drunk while speaking, and Vision getting split in half by She-Hulk. Number 5, Iron Man. Yes, there was even a point during the comics where Tony betrayed the Avengers. Well, sort of, anyways. During the crossing, Tony's brain gets corrupted by Kang the Conqueror. He was trying to control him by making him go crazy. Kang even gets him to frame Hawkeye. Once the Avengers find out, they go back in time to find a younger Tony to help them stop the older Tony. Now, this story was a bit confusing, with some even believing that Tony wasn't as mind-controlled as we all believed he was, since in the end, he didn't even seem surprised by anything he found out that he did while working for Kang.
Number 4, Swordsman. The Swordsman was Hawkeye's mentor and a criminal who tried to join the Avengers just so that he could take advantage of the benefits. When they turned him away, he was approached by Iron Man's arch-enemy, the Mandarin, who gave him a new sword and a special mission: to infiltrate the Avengers and destroy them from the inside. Mandarin engineered a plot to trick the Avengers into thinking that Iron Man had vouched for the Swordsman. The ploy actually worked, and Swordsman was allowed entry, but not without gaining the suspicion of his new teammates. And honestly, rightly so, because Swordsman planted a bomb in Avengers Mansion, just as he was told to, but began to have second thoughts because of the feelings he developed for Scarlet Witch. When he tried to remove the bomb, he was caught by Captain America and forced into a fight. Despite the Swordsman's betrayal, years later he was actually forgiven and welcomed back onto the team alongside his wife Mantis. Honestly, I really think the Avengers are just a little bit too trusting sometimes. Number 3, Dr. Druid. While most would consider Dr. Druid to be a pretty obscure member of the Avengers, he's actually spent enough time with the team to make his eventual betrayal memorable. Dr. Druid is a sorcerer who practices Celtic magic that he picked up from the Ancient One. His magical abilities are overshadowed by another one of the Ancient One's peoples, Doctor Strange, of course. I know it seems like he is just a minor character, but trust me, he is not. Dr. Druid was still a fairly new addition to the Avengers when he had the sudden impulse to become its leader. He started out by undermining the current leader, Captain Marvel, aka Monica Rambeau. He questioned every move she made and constantly stated that the Avengers needed a much stronger leader. And when Captain Marvel had to temporarily step down for medical reasons, Dr. Druid used his mental powers to manipulate the Avengers into electing him as the leader in Avengers number 294. And in this time, he also forced She-Hulk to fight her fellow Avengers, which ultimately led to her quitting the team. As it turned out, though, Druid himself had been under the control of Kang's wife Ravonna, who used him to gain control of the rest of the Avengers, and after Druid was defeated and lost in the time stream, the Avengers actually disbanded for a while. Number 2, Wonder Man. The ionic energy-powered superhero Wonder Man has a long history with the Avengers that goes all the way back to his debut in Avengers number 9 in 1964, the same issue in which he also died. Wonder Man was resurrected years later and has become a staple in the Avengers ever since, either serving on the main Avengers team or in the West Coast branch. When Simon Williams first joined the Avengers, his life actually depended on betraying them, and here I'll explain why. Wonder Man acquired his powers from Baron Zemo and the Masters of Evil. Zemo used an experimental ionic ray to give him his powers, but the effects would end him if he didn't receive a weekly antidote. In order to get that antidote, Wonder Man had to infiltrate the Avengers' ranks and deliver them to the Masters of Evil. Wonder Man led his new team into an ambush, but changed his mind when the fighting started. He helped the Avengers defeat the Masters of Evil even though it meant giving up the antidote. Without Zemo's antidote, Wonder Man seemingly perished, but would eventually return and rejoin the Avengers. Another instance of betrayal by Wonder Man took place in the 2000s when he started being much more aggressive and hateful towards his former teammates. He believed that the Avengers were a disease that was destroying the world instead of making it better. The tension between Wonder Man and the Avengers came head to head when he gathered a team called the Revengers, a small group of heroes and villains with bitter feelings towards the Avengers. Wonder Man led his team in an all-out assault against the Avengers. When Wonder Man was defeated though, it was determined that his ionic energy was actually having an effect on his brain. And when he was finally cured, Wonder Man just apologized for all the trouble he caused, but he still was a traitor nonetheless. And number 1, the Protector. Novar is a Kree soldier who sided with Earth during the Secret Invasion. After taking the name Captain Marvel, the same name used by the Kree hero Mar-Vell, he joined Osborn's Avengers. After leaving the team, he became a member of the official Avengers team as the Protector. He served them very well for a time, and until Avengers vs. X-Men, which saw the world threatened by the coming of the Phoenix Force. The Avengers needed all hands on deck, meaning it was a bad time for one of their own to turn into a traitor. He betrayed the Avengers during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, although he didn't actually side with the X-Men. If the Protector had his way, he would have helped the Avengers stop the Phoenix Force and continued to serve on their team. But as a Kree warrior, Novar felt compelled to comply with the Supreme Intelligence, who ordered him to steal the Phoenix Force sample from the Avengers and deliver it to the Kree Empire. Novar obeyed, even though the sample was a critical piece of the Avengers' plan to stop the Phoenix Force. When the Protector learned the Kree wouldn't honor their responsibility to protect Earth, he stole the sample back and wanted to rejoin the Avengers. The Avengers, however, wanted absolutely nothing to do with him, and honestly, I can't blame them. Number 10, Tony Stark. Yet another time where Tony has gone off the rails a little bit, this time taking place in the Axis event, in which the morality of Earth's heroes and villains were reversed by magic. While the spell was undone, the now corrupt Tony managed to shield himself and thus retained his evil personality, even though most of Earth's heroes reverted back to their usual selves. With his still vast intellect and suave personality, this darker Tony was able to infiltrate society and build an empire for himself, growing into an egotistical monster, releasing the Extremis 3.0 virus to the public as an app, addicting people to the substance and then depriving them of any further upgrades until they paid his fee of $100 per day. This caused a ton of suffering as a large portion of society basically became addicts and were enslaved to Tony's will. Now, like I said though, this Tony retained his intelligence. He knew exactly what he had to do to balance his cruelty in order to prevent the world from rising up against him. So he engaged in hostile takeovers of many companies, forcing them to promote his extremist apps through blackmail, and even went as far as unleashing an army of advanced drones to act as personal police force. By every definition of the word, he just became a tyrant. Number 9, Ant-Man. During Marvel's Secret Empire event, you know, the one where Captain America revealed himself to be the supreme leader of Hydra, Ant-Man, like many of the other heroes, naturally sided with the hero side of things and was a dedicated member of the Underground. That is, until his daughter Cassie was abducted by Hydra and he was forced to not only comply with their every demand, but also report to them all the plans of the Underground Resistance. While many of the plans he relayed weren't too major, he was forced to tell Hydra when the heroes managed to find 2 fragments of the Cosmic Cube, and that resulted in Hydra showing up at the Underground's doorstep. I will say though, to his merit, he did confess that he was involved with Hydra and tried to make amends for doing wrong by the team. And he also played a huge role in restoring Steve Rogers when the Cosmic Cube reformed. Now, if you've got the time, this storyline definitely deserves a read, starting with 2017 Secret Empire Volume 1, Number 0. Number 8, Avenger X. When the Avengers initially sought out to track down the Stranger alongside the X-Men, Professor X used Cerebro to locate and rescue Cressida from the cosmic being, and upon first glance, she seemed like the perfect weapon. Her powers augmented the strength and abilities of her teammates, allowing them to take on groups of supervillains with ease. As she was explaining what she was capable of, Scarlet Witch cut her off and just offered her a spot on the team, which honestly made sense because who wouldn't want someone like that on their team? But what they didn't realize is that there was actually a huge cost that comes along with her powers. In order to empower anybody and increase their abilities, she has to drain the lives of everyone and everything around her. And while they were unaware of this, Cressida was plotting to use this power of hers to finally end the Avengers for good, taking them down from the inside by absorbing their powers instead of empowering them. Captain America was the one who confronted Avenger X, and with her plot to divide the Avengers folded, Cressida disclosed the true extent of her abilities by siphoning the Avengers' life force and utilizing their combined powers to quickly defeat them. Number 7. Vision. Now if you know Vision, then you know that he's not usually one to betray his team unless there is a quote-unquote perfectly logical reason for it. There was the time after he linked up with a supercomputer from Titan and he thought the only way he could protect her was for him to run it himself. At first he only wanted some additional power and he helped Hawkeye establish the West Coast Avengers to expand the Avengers' influence, and even met with the leader of the free world about making the leader of the Avengers a cabinet position. When his schemes didn't give him the control he wanted in Avengers number 253, he took over nearly every computer on the planet, starting with the machines that controlled the world's weapons, and he went, let's just say, a little bit crazy with power. Interestingly enough though, that wasn't the only time Vision betrayed the Avengers, as there was the time that his actions cost the Avengers the trust of the federal government. Vision's difficulties with balancing his emotions got the best of him after he became the leader of the team. In trying to create world peace, Vision tried to take control of the world's computers and defense systems. He was opposed by the Avengers, who had to launch an attack on their own headquarters just to defeat him. Vision eventually realized his mistake and tried to atone for his crime, but unfortunately the damage was already done. Number 6. Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff started off his costume career as Quicksilver on the wrong side of the law, working with his sister Wanda on Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Eventually deciding to reform, Pietro and Wanda would join the first new lineup of the Avengers alongside another former criminal, Hawkeye, under the leadership of Captain America. Quicksilver blamed the Avengers for his strained relationship on his sister and his wife, and he gave government information to get back at them. In 1986, the East and West Coast Avengers were playing baseball when they received a surprise visit from the Freedom Force, a group of X-Men and villains released from prison to work for the government. Mystique, leader of the Freedom Force, announced to the Avengers that they were to be arrested for treason. And after a fierce battle with the Freedom Force, Captain America agreed to surrender. At a hearing, the Avengers were told that someone had obtained proof that Vision's attempt to gain control of the world's computers was actually a plot engineered by the Avengers themselves. And the Avengers demanded to know who their accuser was, and after much suspense, the traitor was revealed to be none other than Quicksilver. Number 5. Sandman. To his merit, Sandman did actually make an attempt to reform. He received a full pardon for all his misdeeds and even served as a reserve member of the Avengers for a time. During his run as a hero, he was actually able to make friends with his former enemy Spider-Man, but sadly good things don't last forever, not even in comic books. In 1999, Sandman turned his back on his fellow heroes and joined up with his old partners from the Frightful Four, Wizard, and Trapster. It wasn't entirely his fault since the Wizard used his ID machine to bring out the evil side of Sandman once again, but still. Sandman used the trust he had gained with Spider-Man to his advantage, allowing him a chance to take him by surprise. In returning to his villainous ways, Sandman not only betrayed Spider-Man, but the Avengers as well, causing his membership to be revoked.
Number 4. Namor. During the Avengers vs. X-Men series, Namor left the Avengers and went on the side of the X-Men. Now, to be clear, the X-Men were only trying to apprehend the Avengers, but Namor planned something much more evil. And by evil, I mean he found out that the Avengers were in Wakanda and thought that was the perfect plan to take them out would be to drown them with a huge-ass wave. It didn't end up working for Namor, and instead only enraged the Wakandans wanting revenge for what he did. From there, Namor and Wakanda became rivals. This rivalry is something that fans have wanted to see be a part of the MCU since the introduction of Wakanda in Black Panther in 2018. Number 3. Hulk. In the comics, at one point, Hulk came to the conclusion that the Avengers disliked him, and that really irritated the Hulk, which is something that you really don't want to do, especially to the Hulk. He ends up leaving the team and trying to work with Namor to get revenge on them. Apparently, even though Hulk and Namor were working together, they weren't going to stay loyal for long after their plan was complete. In the end, and before the battle was complete, Hulk turned into Bruce Banner and took off and disappeared. Number 2. Black Widow. So in the comics, Black Widow has turned on the Avengers at one point. Now, in her defense, she was being blackmailed by Weeping Lion with the goal to go rogue and turn on S.H.I.E.L.D. During this time, she allowed herself to be brought back to the Avengers Tower by Tony Stark. She only let him take her back there to gain access to his equipment. So she knocked him out and took what she needed. Also, during the MCU Civil War, she also turned on Tony Stark and ended up jumping ship and siding with Captain America. Number 1. Captain America. This was a huge shocker at one point in the comic and was a jaw-dropping moment when fans were reading it. The reveal that Captain America was really a Hydra agent all along sent shockwaves through the fanbase. How could the Star-Spangled Man be evil? He has always proven to do anything he had to protect his family, team, and his country. It turns out that the Cosmic Cube had altered Steve Rogers' history in a major way, making him this Hydra agent and betraying everything he stood for. It led Rogers to take over America with Zemo, all in the name of Hydra. Desperate to stop this, Ant-Man and the Winter Soldier went into the Pocket Dimension to find Steve Rogers' consciousness. They were able to use the Cobra to save Steve Rogers' true form. Evil Steve Rogers fought good Steve Rogers in the end, and good prevailed, and evil Steve Rogers was defeated by good Steve Rogers wielding Mjolnir in an epic battle.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Avengers Under Siege. Written by Roger Stern, released in 1987, this is their first big battle after taking on Loki. It's a fan favorite, so I figured I'd start with this one. It began back in Avengers issue 270, when the Avengers were still living in Tony Stark's mansion in New York. It was comfortable until Baron Zemo and the Masters of Evil stormed the mansion. Tigra and Black Knight were injured severely, and Hercules was beaten so hard he went into a coma. And while they still were in for a hot minute, the Masters of Evil destroyed everybody's belongings, including the only photo left of Captain America's mother. That was a pretty sad page. Number 9, Secret Invasion. With Disney announcing all these new Marvel shows, we can start speculating where the plot might go. Like, for example, Secret Invasion was announced, and now Emilia Clarke has signed on to do it, along with Samuel L. Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn, so it's clear some Skrulls are probably going to be in the picture. In the comics, Secret Invasion was an event that took place where Skrulls wanted to take over Earth. They thought it was rightfully theirs, so they're like, yeah, let's do this. So what better way to take over the world than to blend in like one of the greatest heroes on it? So after the Skrulls had experimented on the Illuminati, they put one Skrull secretly in every team in all these states. So with Sharon Carter making some shady phone calls after she was pardoned in the final credits scene of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I'm betting that she's already secretly a Skrull. Number 8, House of M. This 8-part event written by Brian Michael Bendis starts off rather beautiful, dare I say. Wanda Maximoff is giving birth to her new twins. Vision is by her side, and then Xavier's voice just pops in out of nowhere, demanding that Wanda returns the world to normal. She refuses, and she hangs on to her children, and they shatter. The world goes away, and Wanda returns back to the normal world, where she has no twins, but she's in a dark room on Genosha. And he uses his powers to put her back to sleep. Then in comes Magneto, and he asks about his daughter's progress. And Charles is afraid, because at this point, her power is too much to handle. Now in Avengers Tower, the team is discussing on what to do with Wanda. The ideas are getting kind of dark, because they have to. Wolverine is suggesting that they just take out Wanda, just killing her, which is pretty dark. But then when Quicksilver passes on this gossip, Wanda then warps reality into a world called House of M, where mutants were top dogs and Magneto and his family just ruled them all. Other Marvel heroes were given their desires, like Peter was married to Gwen Stacy, Cyclops is married to Emma Frost, and Doctor Strange is a psychologist. The world is completely different, but the only person who remembers real life is Wolverine, the same guy who suggested that they Wanda. Things took a turn, and the event became even more stressful when Wanda uttered those 3 words in issue 7. No more mutants. Number 7, Secret Empire. In Avengers Endgame, Steve uses future knowledge to obtain the scepter. He says, "Hail Hydra," Rumlow gives it over, no elevator fight needed. Nice. It was a fun moment in the theater, but the line, "Hail Hydra," comes right from the comics. But this time around, it's not that entertaining. The last words come from Steve after the Avengers standoff event, where it's revealed he's actually a sleeper agent of Hydra. Another pawn of the Red Skull after all. This was huge news. I mean, fans were really upset. Readers were sending in death threats to the writers. The 2017 series Secret Empire was wild. The team had to go against their own leader Cap, who was trying to take over the government with Hydra, and then eventually run all of the United States. It was crazy. Bad Steve took out Rick Jones, he took out Black Widow. I mean, it's fair, readers were upset, really. This is a nightmare. In the end, it was concluded that Bad Cap was a double and Good Cap was actually locked in the Cosmic Cube. Number 6, Axis. When Red Skull abducted numerous mutants and Inhumans, Magneto tracked him down. Now at the same time, Scarlet Witch, Rogue, and Havoc were captured by Red Skull's S-Men and brought to the island / horror camp. The Avengers escaped and saved Magneto. Magneto gave Red Skull the beatdown of a lifetime. He got caught up in the moment and went a little bit too far, perhaps. Magneto says that he did what had to be done, and he thinks that he saved countless amount of lives. But then Red Onslaught rises to the challenge. Red Skull is reborn. This time he's bigger and badder. The X-Men and Avengers team up to stop Red Onslaught, where a number of heroes inverted. Yeah, their personality and moral compass just totally flipped. which certainly didn't help the situation at all. But the fun part is when our villains also get inverted and they join the Avengers to stop Red Onslaught. So it's a mess. It's a big fun mess. Number 5, Age of Ultron. This one just starts off hot right off the bat. Hawkeye is sneaking into this abandoned building, just taking dudes out slowly. They have Spider-Man captured and he looks terrible. He looks like he just got hit by a freight train. Now in the MCU, Tony and Bruce are the masterminds behind Ultron, but in the comics, it was actually Hank Pym. Ultron made his first debut back in 1968 in Avengers issue 54, and in the comics, Hank Pym was actually the father of Ultron. He actually has the same brain patterns as Hank Pym, because he figured it needed personality, much like our MCU version of Ultron is another personality of Tony Stark's. So cut to the comic event Age of Ultron by Brian Michael Bendis. We see Ultron in all of his glory and it's quite menacing. The world is just trashed. He's from the future and he's here to take over the planet. The death toll reaches billions, including some of our favorite heroes. If you haven't read it, strongly recommend. Much better than the movie Age of Ultron, which was just like the weekend of Ultron, rather.
Number 4, Captain Marvel kills Tony Stark. During the events of Civil War II, we saw Tony Stark's Iron Man and Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel butt heads over what the best decision would be when it came to using or not using the Inhuman Ulysses' future vision. This all happened after Carol had been attempting to fight Thanos, whom Ulysses had predicted would return, and during the fight, Rhodey, aka War Machine, was killed. Carol was for using Ulysses' visions to prevent possible catastrophic events, whereas Tony was against punishing or arresting people based solely on Ulysses' visions, which he thought might be flawed. The Civil War ended with Carol seemingly killing Tony, though it was later revealed he was still alive, but in a coma, and then of course later on he woke back up, and he would actually even come to forgive Captain Marvel. And now they don't really talk about the fact that that all happened. Number 3, Steve Rogers kills Superior Iron Man. During the events of Time Runs Out, as a final incursion threatened the very existence of the entire planet and universe, Superior Iron Man and old Steve Rogers came to blows. They were fighting about the controversial actions of the one secret organization of brilliant minds known as the Illuminati. Also, Superior Iron Man is just kind of a jerk, so it makes sense that Captain America would be like, I'm gonna fight you, you're evil. Captain America had declared Iron Man and the Illuminati enemies due to their actions, and as such, the two heroes and former friends had come to blows over the argument. Just as the world was about to end, these two fought each other to death, both being taken out by a helicarrier during their fight in their last moments before everything reset. And then Battleworld happened. Woo! Number 2, young Tony Stark kills older Tony Stark. During the events of The Crossing, a wildly crazy story, it is revealed that Tony was a sleeper agent for Kang the Conqueror, who he later found out was actually a Mortis in disguise, posing as Kang. Evil older Tony kills tons of people before the Avengers attempt to stop him by bringing back a younger version of himself from the past who they hope can help to stop their Tony. This didn't quite work out as they planned, but in the end, older Tony and fake Kang were defeated when older Tony, inspired by younger Tony, decided to sacrifice himself, switching back to the side of the heroes right before he died. With older Tony dead, it was decided that younger Tony would stay in the future and take his place. Number 1, Tony Stark kills immoral Tony Stark. A crazy turn of events came about that led young Tony Stark to effectively make himself brain dead in the comics in the Invincible No More story. Following Secret Invasion, Norman Osborn created Hammer in the place of S.H.I.E.L.D. and created his own Avengers, which we know as the Dark Avengers, mainly comprised of villains who adopted heroic personas to mirror that of the original Avengers team. To prevent Osborn from getting a hold of information that was gathered from heroes during the events of the first Civil War as part of the Superhuman Registration Act, Stark transferred the files from S.H.I.E.L.D. computers to his own brain, and then later wiped his own mind completely, making him brain dead. Tony would later return, but not really as the same version of himself. This Tony Stark would not have the knowledge of his actions during the first Civil War. How convenient. Number 10, Iron Man almost kills Tony Stark. Iron Man is really good at making suits, sometimes too good. At one point, he decided to make an AI suit instead of an AI to be used in his suit. This artificially intelligent suit did what most artificial robotic intelligences do. It almost immediately became evil. Although Tony did also decide to use some Ultron code to construct it, which honestly probably was not such a good idea, especially for someone who is supposed to be a computer genius. In the end, the suit created programming that allowed it to feel emotions, and after fighting with Tony Stark and trying to get him to forcibly merge with itself, it eventually felt remorse at its action while during their fight, Stark suffered a heart attack. The suit sacrificed its own life, giving Stark an emergency and what looks like terrifying artificial heart transplant. Like, you can still see the artificial heart sticking out of Tony's chest. That does not look sanitary to me. Number 9. The Avengers kill Iron Man. Okay, so the Avengers weren't solely responsible for his death this time around, but they definitely were the ones who caused it to happen. At least in part. During the events of Armor Wars, Iron Man became branded a criminal by the United States government. Among those opposing the vigilante were fellow Avenger Captain America. This, however, happened at a time where Tony Stark was not known to be Iron Man. His identity remained a secret, and Stark simply claimed that the man in the suit was actually his bodyguard, often remote controlling the suit to kind of make it appear as though they were in the same place at the same time, so no one would question his explanation of the identity for Iron Man. In the end, Stark decided, because of being declared an outlaw, to kill Iron Man, claiming that the man in the suit was named Randall Pierce, and staging Pierce's death by allowing an empty remote-controlled piloted suit to be destroyed during a confrontation with the government. This would later allow Tony to reveal himself as Iron Man, though he would at first claim another employee of his had simply taken up the mantle. But we knew the truth. It was really Tony in that suit, once again. Number 8. Zombie Hulk kills Zombie Iron Man. During the events of Marvel Zombies, pretty much almost all of the zombified heroes meet their end at one point or another, save for a lucky, or I guess unlucky, few. Iron Man is not one of the zombified heroes who makes it, however. He is one of the victims of Zombie Hulk, who kills a bunch of other zombies when they start getting angry with him for eating so much, as they fear their food supply of brains and meat is running low. Zombie Hulk crushes Zombie Iron Man to the point that blood sprays out of his mouth and eye holes of his armor. Basically, he squishes him like a grape. Number 7. Tony Stark sacrifices Tony Stark. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was Tony himself who killed Tony, or while he chose to sacrifice himself in order to ensure the events of Thanos' snap at the end of Infinity War, which initially wiped out 50% of all living beings at random, including half the population on planet Earth, remained reversed, so unsnapped if you will. In order to bring everyone back, the heroes needed to time travel to retrieve the Infinity Stones and use them to create their own Infinity Stone gauntlet. Then the question came of, who was going to wield it. The Hulk was the one to bring back everyone using the gauntlet, but Thanos from the past returned to threaten the heroic plans of the Avengers. He attempted to guarantee that his future self's plot, and really his own plot, remained successful, but Tony managed to get rid of him, wielding the gauntlet himself and using it to wipe out Thanos and his army with his own snap. Unfortunately, because Tony Stark is just a man at the end of the day, the amount of energy this required ended up killing him, despite him wearing his Iron Man armor at the time. Number 6. Dark Avengers kill Tony Stark's evil brain. In issue 190 of the Dark Avengers, we get a glimpse into the pocket reality of Earth 13584, where New York is one of the last vestiges of human civilization that various superhero factions fight for power over. One such faction is led by an evil Iron Man who is now just a brain. His armor was crushed by a giant Janet Van Dyne of the same pocket dimension reality. As his brain ejected from the armor, Trickshot of the Dark Avengers, Barney Barton, Clint's brother, shot the brain with an arrow, killing this alternate version of Tony Stark. Number 5. Captain America kills Steel Corpse. In an alternate reality belonging to Age of X, Tony Stark became consumed by a virus which fused him with his suit, causing him to slowly be digested by it. Ew. Formerly known as Iron Man, Tony adopted the mantle of Steel Corpse following this, which he thought was more appropriate considering, he was basically just a corpse in an armor. He joined the Avengers team in their mission to exterminate mutants, but when they decided to rebel against their mission directive, saving mutants instead, an emergency override system caused Stark to be unable to follow suit with the rest of his teammates. Stark told Captain America to save the mutants they were targeting, which he knew meant that Cap would be forced to kill him.
Number 4. Civil War. Okay, the opening scene of Endgame is wild. The remaining heroes, minus Tony Stark, head out into space to take on Thanos, with the help this time of Captain Marvel. They actually sneak up on him and they cut the gauntlet off his arm in like 6 seconds. They kind of win really fast. See, when the Avengers are united and they have a plan, things work out. The other crew in space in Infinity War couldn't even get the gauntlet off of Thanos. Quill was freaking out, the gravity was off, Thanos had the stones, it was tricky, but if Civil War never happened, I fully believe that they would have handled Thanos as a team much sooner. But by the time Thanos begins his quest for the stones, Tony and Steve aren't even on speaking terms. Okay. This all comes down to the events from Captain America Civil War. Now this ends with Tony and Steve fighting it out and Cap drops the shield. Tony blasts off Bucky's arm. It's heartbreaking to say the least, but it's one of my favorite Marvel movies. For some reason. I like watching people lose. I don't know what it is. Number 3, Avengers Disassembled. Brought to us from the mind again of Brian Michael Bendis, Avengers Disassembled is a 5-parter that brings the team together just to be torn apart again. It is a ride. The story begins with the Avengers mansion sensors blasting to warn the team of an intruder. Now the intruder is the Jack of Hearts, who actually died beforehand saving Cassie, Ant-Man's daughter. So what's going on here? Why is he here? Well, Jack blows up, taking half the mansion out with him, along with the life of Ant-Man. That's crazy. And then the Vision crash lands with the Quinjet, starts attacking the rest of the survivors, and then She-Hulk comes out and rips Vision into 2. And then while She-Hulk was going nuts, she accidentally hurt Wasp, Captain America, and Captain Britain. She-Hulk ended up leaving the group because of the guilt inside after she just wreaked havoc. Now this whole event is wild, even before Scarlet Witch is revealed to be behind it all. Spoiler alert. This is when Wanda lost her 2 kids because, well, they weren't actually her 2 kids. They were created from Mephisto. So she was upset. Eventually, she was defeated by Doctor Strange and Magneto took over from there. Now, this is where people, and I, want Wanda to go in the MCU. Perhaps studying the Darkhold and the recent loss of Tommy and Billy, she might make a big bad comeback. Who knows? Number 2, Avengers Red Zone. Avengers Volume 3 Issue 65, titled Avengers Red Zone, is a 6-parter that begins with this mysterious red cloud coming through South Dakota. Oh, this is a nightmare. So it's bringing a plague, basically. It's a red mist of doom. It's kind of like the movie The Mist, but without monsters, although it's just as terrifying. So everybody wears masks, because you know that's what happens when there's a plague and you don't want to, die, you wear masks. Weird concept, I know. But it's still a war zone. People are dying off fast. Now in comes Captain America and the Avengers to save the day, figure out what's going on. And the team struggles here a lot. They get sick, they get infected, their motivation is just low, their team members are dying off, and things come to a fun turn when Iron Man and Black Panther create a cure. Great, but Iron Man gets trapped by Red Skull come part 6. The team is not looking good at this point. Cap is down, so Tony takes his suit off and exposes himself to the mist in order to give Steve CPR. No sacrifice, no victory. Sam Witwicky. And finally, number 1, Infinity Gauntlet. Coming from the minds of Jim Starlin, George Perez, and Ron Lim, Infinity Gauntlet was released in 1991, and Avengers Infinity War mirrored a lot of what happened from that event. Yes, Thanos wanted to take out half the universe because he wanted to impress Mistress Death this time around. He wanted to be her equal, whereas in the movie, he just wanted to fill people's bellies. The film adaptation was, in my opinion, Marvel's best work. All those characters in one movie, it felt smooth, didn't feel long, it didn't feel slow at any part. It's kind of great. In the movie, when Thanos is obtaining these gems, he toys with the Avengers in a similar way. In the comic, he turned them into strings and cubes, and then in Infinity War, Drax and Mantis had that happen to them as well. Even in theaters, I was like, this looks familiar, the whole cube thing.
At number 10, we have Quake. Quake is originally a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. and is a decent hero himself, but he doesn't bring much to the table for the Avengers. One of her most notable contributions to the team is helping them take down the Phoenix Force, which is sort of a team effort more than anything. And her biggest task even in that battle is when she interrogates the X-Men. The main issue is that often Daisy Johnson, aka Quake, is better as a spy and a police agent than as a hero. She does have powers, but she spends more time interrogating people and doing more traditional police work than high-level superhero work. Something that also seems a little counterproductive is that she is announced to the public as being part of the Avengers, sort of killing her anonymity as a special agent. This leaves her with a target on her back as a covert spy, and without her spy work, she doesn't really have the power set to really keep up with the other members of the Avengers. Although, let's be honest, the standards for the Avengers are pretty high, and if you can find a way to stand out, you're lucky. Quake had a way to stand out as the covert spy on the team, but this was cut short by this announcement by Captain America. Even if I'm over-exaggerating the significance of that event though, she still just doesn't make a huge impact on the team, even as an undercover agent. At number 9 is Quasar. This hero is sort of like the Marvel equivalent to DC's Green Lantern, to the point where many people see him as a blatant ripoff. Starting off as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Wendell Elvis Vaughn comes across a set of power bands which he uses to gain superpowers and become designated as the protector of the universe. Where this character falls flat is simply in the way that he seems to waste his potential. His powers allow him to traverse the cosmos and extend the bandwidth of the Avengers into an intergalactic context. Although Thor does that a little bit, he could definitely have helped. But he doesn't really take advantage of these supreme abilities as much as he could. I mean, he's the protector of the universe. You'd think that his story would break some more ground and offer the Avengers a more exciting addition to their already enormous bandwidth of power, but he doesn't. These days, the Guardians of the Galaxy seem to be filling the Avengers' quotas for cosmic exploration and protection, which leaves Quasar feeling a little irrelevant. Maybe not a bad hero on his own, but he's criminally underdeveloped and a little bland considering the extent of his powers. At number 8 is Mantis. Mantis is also very powerful, but she doesn't really do much for the Avengers while she's part of the team. After officially joining the West Coast Avengers, she helps them take down Voice, which is basically the extent of her work with them before that version of her is killed. And what seems to be a theme with Mantis is getting other teams of superheroes to help her complete her own personal quests, like the time when she gets the West Coast Avengers to help get to the bottom of her issues during the Fragmented Mind storyline, or another time when she gets the Fantastic Four to help her figure out some other personal issues. She does some pretty heavy lifting in the Thanos War storyline, actually facing him one-on-one, ending up in a tie, but she's not officially an Avenger at that point. She also seems to stir up a lot of drama within the Avengers, getting caught in a bit of a love triangle with Swordsman and Vision. She's definitely not the worst of the Avengers, but she doesn't do much to help them during her short time with the membership. Besides, it's the West Coast Avengers. They're not really the most powerful or impactful iteration of the team either way. Don't kill me in the comments if you disagree, it's just what I'm gauging from the online conversation. At number 7, we have Ex Nihilo and Abyss. This pair of strange aliens actually join the Avengers at one point, and it's a really strange addition to the team, to say the least. Since they joined at the same time during the Infinity storyline, I figured I'd put them in the same entry here. These two aliens have so much power that where they really fail to make an impact is by not exploring these powers very much. This seems to be a theme in this second part, just heroes who have tons of power that they're never given the chance to use for whatever reasons. It also seems that these two extraterrestrials have their own cosmic destinies already planned out for them, and neither have much to do with the Avengers or any of their goals. My best guess is that writers included them in a moment when it made sense, but then after a while realized that they were too overpowered or not grounded enough as characters to serve the Avengers properly. Because looking back on them now, it's pretty apparent to fans online that they were never really fitting for the Avengers in the first place. At number 6, we have Red Hulk. Another sort of pointless copy of an already established Avenger. Red Hulk just doesn't bring anything new to the table when he joins, and his attitude is just sort of unlikable at times. I know the Hulk isn't really known for his attitude either, but there's something about General Thaddeus Ross that doesn't really sit right. He's sort of like a stuck-up army general who doesn't know how to turn off his critical edge and be a team player. Well, actually, it's not sort of like that. He's just like that. That's exactly what he is. Although when he turns into the Hulk, he does keep his rational thinking mind, which gives him a slight edge over the Hulk, who basically has a one-track mind to destroy everything in his path. But as good as this sounds, it sort of acts as a lesson to the Avengers, in that even though the Hulk can be a lot at times, having a rational tactical mind inside the beast can also cause problems, because in the case of General Thaddeus Ross, his tactical mind isn't the most cooperative or friendly when getting things done, and he just seems to put everyone off with his approach to collaboration. But he's still pretty strong, so we can't get too carried away here. After all, attitude isn't the only thing that should be considered when ranking the Avengers. But even then, when looking at his abilities, he's not much of a standout member of the team either. No matter which way you look at it, he's still just a different colored Hulk. They've already got a green one. At number 5 is Rage. This guy holds the accolade of being the youngest to ever join the Avengers, but not much else. And this wasn't by design. Rage's powers were acquired by an exposure to toxic waste, which actually gives him the body of a full-grown man, even though he's only 13 in reality. So when he joins the Avengers, he does it under false pretenses fooling even Captain America into thinking he is a suitable age for the team. And even though they do give Spider-Man a membership to the team, he's always been known as an exception to this no teenagers rule. The protocol is typically to keep the team consisting of physically and mentally mature heroes who can handle extremely high stakes situations without issue. And unfortunately, Rage's failure to do that is what makes him one of the worst Avengers. He just shows a pretty immature disposition, and it sort of overshadows his abilities as a hero. And failing to hide this immaturity, he also finds himself on the outs of the Avengers a bit earlier than he may have hoped. Not in the most gracious fashion either. Captain America basically catches on and fires him off the team once he realizes that somewhere deep down he's just a mere middle schooler. Number 4, triathlon. Delroy Garrett Jr. is a pretty exceptional human, I won't lie. I mean, he wound up making it into the Olympic Games and won a total of 3 gold medals, so obviously he's got some talent, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but not really, as he tested positive for steroids and was basically banned from sports for life after that. Turning to religion, Garrett ended up joining a cult that bestowed him with the powers of 3D Man, which basically meant that he gained various superhuman physical attributes that are approximately 3 times greater than that of even the finest human athlete. Pretty much he gained the powers he got from steroids without the steroids. Captain America eventually recruited Triathlon for the Secret Avengers, a team that worked against the Superhuman Registration Act, but Triathlon kept pushing for the main Avengers to be just a little bit more diverse, and that landed him on a spot on the main team for a while. Now, in all honesty, that's all he did for the Avengers, make them just that tiny bit more diverse, so kudos to him for that, but maybe try being a better hero next time.
Number 3, Jocasta. Jocasta could have been super cool, but she was kind of relegated to just being Ultron's tattletale and almost loyal mate. She was built by Ultron to be his mate and bride in a sense, sort of like the story of Frankenstein's bride. At first he had tried to transfer the mind of Janet Van Dyne into Jocasta. This actually succeeded, but just made Janet in Jocasta's robotic body seek to tell the Avengers what was going on, and they put a stop to Ultron's madness, reversing the procedure. Jocasta would return a few more times in the comics, but never made much of an impression. She actually could have been a really cool character, but it always feels like she's never really given much of a chance to shine. Still often being resorted to plots where Ultron wants to merge her with Janet, even in the modern day. She was granted Avengers status when she decided to sacrifice herself in order to destroy the Evolutionary's base before she died in the process. And Avengers Annual Issue 17 out of 1988.
Number 2, Stingray. Dr. Walter Newell was a brilliant oceanographer and engineer who supervised the construction of a domed undersea city with plans to grow food for mankind. The city was attacked by the Plunderer, but he was stopped by the Atlanteans Namor, the Submariner, and Lady Dorma, but unfortunately the city was destroyed. Now, in response to this, he designed a suit specifically for the deep sea exploration that he named Stingray, as much of the design was based on manta rays. The suit can safely operate in depths of up to 1,200 feet, has a unique oxygen diffusion system based on fish gills, grants Newell superhuman strength and durability to handle underwater conditions, and is able to swim at high speeds underwater. Now, Newell can also glide when not in the water, which is a pretty sweet add-on if I do say so myself. Also, should probably mention that the main weapon of the suit is a potent electrical blast, so the name Stingray is definitely fitting. In all honesty, the only reason Stingray was ever an Avenger was because the team needed to use his Hydro base as a launch site when the US government placed airspace restrictions preventing the Avengers from launching Quinjets to downtown Manhattan. Other than that, he really didn't offer much else for the team. Sorry, man.
Number 1, Dr. Druid. Dr. Druid was Anthony Ludgate, originally a student of psychology and psychiatry who was very much interested in the ancient powers of druids and those of the occult. He wasn't such a bad hero to begin with, but quickly became overshadowed by greater mystic heroes such as Doctor Strange. He also studied under the Ancient One, and after some successful heroic pursuits was made an Avenger. However, he became bewitched by Ravonna Renslayer and did some pretty awful things, like manipulating the Avengers into making him chairman, usurping Captain Marvel aka Monica Rambeau, who held the title previously. Following this, he got lost in the time stream, and when he returned, used his hypnotism to swindle someone out of their property so he could rent it out to make money and spend his days drinking. Since then, he has died, returned, and become more of a villainous character in the comics, with his Avengers membership being revoked. Which makes sense.
Number 10, Silverclaw. Maria Santiago, aka Silverclaw, was born near the village of Kamakiri in South America, and this village was filled with simple folk whose ancestors worshipped the ancient gods until the arrival of the Spaniards. Her father was a native of the village who was constantly ridiculed for his beliefs, and his daughter was no different, as she was ridiculed for, well, different reasons. You've heard of werewolves, right? Well, Maria had the interesting ability to transform into a variety of were forms, including jaguar, anaconda, cockatoo, monkey, sloth, and cheetah, and they were unfortunately uncontrollable for a while, which was not too great to say the least because it scared a lot of people. Now fast forward a bit and we see Silverclaw join the Avengers during the Civil War arc. And in this arc she fought Captain Marvel, who was attempting to get her to sign the Superhuman Registration Act. Silverclaw was pretty against the SHRA as it was not the law in her country and she was not a US citizen. Now as a result, a pitched battle between the two occurred with Silverclaw able to just so close evade arrest. After Captain America's assassination, she did voluntarily surrender and was registered as a US citizen. Now why is she so useless? Well, because she's not only just a bit lame of a character, but she didn't really do anything of worth that landed her a permanent position on the Avengers team. Now I do like her power though, I can't lie.
Number 9, Swordsman. Okay, so I'll give you that Swordsman was at least talented in his art form, but at the end of the day, he's just a guy with good sword skills. You might be thinking, who are you going to rag on next, Amanda? Clint Barton? You also might be thinking, Amanda, wow, did you just use the term rag? Are you from like the 1930s? I'm not, though I should be maybe. And no, I'm not going to insult Hawkeye by putting him on this list. While there are many other Avengers who are just humans with superpower-like skill sets, Clint at least is also a super interesting character. Swordsman, however, remains quite dated, relegated to being a hero of the past. He might have been good with the sword, but that also wasn't enough to have him save himself and also save his true love Mantis at the same time. Tisk tisk. And sure, Swordsman may have returned as a cooler Katati version of himself, but let's not forget that this is technically a different character. As while his Katati version has all of Swordsman Jacques Duquesne's memories, he is still an entity separate from Swordsman and made more interesting by the fact that he is part of the alien Katati race, let's be honest.
Number 8, Star Fox. Now originally named Eron and rechristened Eros at the age of 5, Star Fox is the son of two Eternals who has a pretty interesting power to say the least. Now what's that power, you ask? Well, he has the ability to manipulate the pleasure centers of the brain of any people within 25 feet of himself. This power emanates from him at all times and causes people to feel, well, good. And by concentrating just a little bit more, he can provoke extremely pleasurable sensations and make a person highly aroused, euphoric, or totally sedated depending on what the situation calls for. Eros has spent most of his life fighting his power-hungry brother Thanos, and that's right, that Thanos. And honestly, you'd think that being related to one of the biggest and strongest bad guys in all of Marvel history would make you a pretty useful ally, but sadly you'd be wrong. The Avengers admitted him to their training program and gave him the name Star Fox since they felt Eros was a little inappropriate for a code name. And he served the Avengers faithfully for several months, helping them vanquish enemies like the Wizard, Terminus, and Maelstrom. That being said though, when he first joined the Avengers, he intentionally failed to mention his ability. Needless to say, when they found out, he didn't last.
Number 7, Two Gun Kid. Another human, Two Gun Kid is a Western style hero. Sure, Westerns are cool, but Two Gun Kid is basically just a cowboy. Take away his guns and his horse lightning and there ain't much there to work with. We aren't talking about the original Two Gun Kid either. The original Two Gun Kid was Clay Harder, who first appeared in 1948 in Two Gun Kid issue number 1. This version of Two Gun Kid, Matt Hawk, would not appear until 1962 in issue 60 of the series. He doesn't have superpowers and he's literally from the 1870s, so he wouldn't be a very knowledgeable hero in the modern day. In fact, when he came to the modern day, he had Hawkeye show him around, became an honorary member of the Avengers, but then decided he missed his own time period, so returned home. Peace.
Number 6, Demolition Man. Born and raised in Detroit, Dennis Dunphy idolized superheroes ever since a young age. After not getting drafted onto any professional football teams, which was kind of his dream as an adult, he was approached by an agent of the Power Broker and offered the chance to undergo a process to increase his physical strength to superhuman levels, hoping that this would increase his chances of becoming a professional football player. Obviously he agreed and had his strength boosted, but with his newfound power, he actually couldn't safely compete against any other regular athletes. Not too long after, Captain America took an interest in Power Broker Inc. because of one of its clients, the Super Patriot, and then soon after, Dunphy allied himself with Rogers, created a costume based on Daredevil and Wolverines, and captured Carl Malice, the head scientist. This unfortunately resulted in Dunphy's own capture though, and he was subjected to more tests, which resulted in a bit of a heart attack. Captain America thankfully saved him and nursed him back to health, and for a time, Dunphy acted as Steve's telephone hotline operator. When Cap reformed the Avengers, he gave D-Man a call, though one can't shake the feeling it was mostly out of sympathy. D-Man was quickly forgotten and lived a sad life as a homeless person before resorting to villainy. Dennis is a very nice guy and hopefully he gets help, but he's really just not Avengers material. Should've stuck to being Steve's secretary, man.
Number 5, Doombot. This is what happens when you let Hank Pym run the Avengers. In the series Avengers AI, Hank leads his own Avengers team. Who does he decide to put on it? Let's see. Doombot. Let's also acknowledge that this only happened because after one of the many battles against and defeats of Ultron, Hank decided keeping artificial intelligence as prisoners was bad, but he had no qualms with reprogramming them, which also seems morally ambiguous in my opinion. He also had no problem with putting tiny black holes inside them, which also seems very irresponsible. True facts. Hank reprogrammed the Doombot to be loyal to him and made him a member of his artificially intelligent Avengers team, whose roster also included Victor Mancha and Protector. Yeah. Pym probably just shouldn't get to lead Avengers teams in my opinion. Certainly not AI ones either. He also created Ultron, so... Doombot wasn't completely useless as he was still a Doombot, but wasn't useful enough to be remembered. Sad face. After the AI Avengers disbanded, the rest of the Avengers lost track of him, or didn't care to keep up, and we didn't really see him again until he reappeared to help his teammate Victor Mancha find a new body in the 2017 Runaway series. Also, you should read that because it's really good.
At number 4 we have Deathcry. This character has a very short run with the Avengers and doesn't really make a mark on the team in any significant way. What puts her so high on the list is that she actually forces her way onto the Avengers in a way that infuriates the other team members. Although part of me thinks this makes sense since she's a Shi'ar warrior who is actually commanded by the Empress to protect and ultimately join the Avengers. The only misstep here is that this isn't really her call to make. At least the part where she joins them. For two reasons. Firstly, because she too is a teenager and that's a no-no for the Avengers as discussed before. And secondly, because it's one thing to try and protect the Avengers, but getting an official membership takes a bit more than some altruistic bodyguarding. When she's first rejected by the team, she stays persistent and eventually sort of forces her way onto the team instead. But this doesn't last long as she's incinerated by Captain Universe, who doesn't even really mean to kill her in the first place. It's sort of her fault, realistically. She comes at him in one of her trademark berserker rages just because he takes a kill that she wanted for herself. So in self-defense, he raises a big ball of energy and she kind of just flies into it and just explodes. Not the most gracious ending to an Avengers member, capping off an equally ungracious lifespan. At number 3 is Thunderstrike, another knockoff character, except this guy is a knockoff of Thor, who just doesn't find his footing with the Avengers. This is probably because of how similar he is to the already extremely popular hero when he's introduced in the late 80s. But this isn't a coincidence. Eric Masterson, aka Thunderstrike, first appears in Thor 391 and actually has a quick run as Thor before he's demoted to Thunderstrike. And even though he still remains relatively powerful, his influence just plateaus as soon as he's left to exist in the shadow of the much more popular Thor. And not to mention, his costume, it's just pretty weak. He looks like an aging biker who only shops at thrift stores. It might just be the case that Thunderstrike is meant to be a bit more of a relatable version of Thor that people could see themselves in, but after he joins the Avengers, it proves that he really has no distinct qualities that set him apart from the rest of the team. No offense to him though. It's tough when you're a carbon copy of the God of Thunder just with a worse outfit. Might just be bad luck. Or bad writing. More likely the second one. At number 2 is Gilgamesh, or the Forgotten One, and the second name is fitting because he really just doesn't do anything of substance for the team. He joins in issue number 300 of Avengers when the team is in the process of reforming. So I'm gonna chalk this up to a misstep in the writing process. My theory is that the writers thought that Gilgamesh would be a little bit more popular than he turns out to be. Although, I don't know how that would be possible as well considering his costume, which, just like the previous entry, it's quite understandably known as one of the more boring and downright ugly costumes out of anyone on the Avengers. But besides that, his attitude is also known to be pretty arrogant and a little too proud. For instance, he often refers to himself as being in the higher ranks of the Ageless Eternals. And although he is immortal, you don't really go around pimping yourself like that. He has a lot of potential as a superhero for the team, but that's all the more reason that Avengers fans have been disappointed in his weak and somewhat unlikable influence on the team. Finally, at number 1, we have Triathlon, aka 3D Man. I was sad to have to do 3D Man dirty and put him at number 1 because I actually love this character. Mainly because of how silly it is that he's based on the color palette of a pair of early 2000s 3D sunglasses. And how even sillier it is that his powers really have nothing to do with 3D anything. All these setbacks are the reason why I love this character, but I knew he had to make it onto the list if we made a part 2, so here he is. And apparently a lot of people online agree that he's one of the all-time worst Avengers, so there was no better spot to honor him than at number 1. Originally joining the Secret Avengers, Captain America makes 3D Man a member of the Initiative and puts him on the Hawaii team, which is self-explanatory. It's basically a team in charge of keeping watch over issues that take place in and around the state of Hawaii. And no diss to Hawaii, but there isn't much that goes on over there in the Marvel Universe, at least during 3D Man's run. One of his more notable acts as an Avenger is when he captures Scarlet Witch during the Axis storyline and brings her to a machine Dr. Doom in an effort to take her abilities. But he sort of drops the ball in this moment of glory and she escapes. Look, 3D Man isn't that bad. He's just a weird superhero that just doesn't really make much sense. And the banality of his abilities sort of equate to his lack of usefulness as an Avenger at the end of the day. What can I say?
Number 10, Civil War 1. Oh boy, the first Civil War caused a great uproar and a good deal of problems in the superhero community. It also made Earth vulnerable to attack as it evidently involved just infighting. When superheroes turn on each other, that's bad. When two main superheroes who are part of the same team turn on each other, that's ridiculous. And that's exactly what happened with Civil War 1. While the inciting incident that divided heroes wasn't caused by Iron Man or Captain America, and actually was pretty serious, they both had become leaders of two different approaches for how to best resolve that main issue. Iron Man believed that superhuman beings needed a shorter and tighter leash basically, and should work with the government so they could kind of be overseen. Number 9, Axis. Axis was an event where we saw heroes and villains sort of do kind of like a role reversal. This happened as a result of a spell backfiring, cast by, well, you probably guessed it, none other than Scarlet Witch. Wanda, for being a powerful magic user, has kind of a challenging time with magic. Although, to be fair, she actually wasn't the only caster involved here, although she is the one that we often talk about. Doctor Strange started casting with her, and when he got taken out, Dr. Doom actually helped in his stead. So Doom is also possibly to blame as well, even though Wanda usually takes a lot of the flack for this one. What launched the Axis event was Wanda and Doom attempting to cast this spell on the evolved and supremely powerful version of Red Skull, Red Onslaught, which sort of came about when Magneto was like, I know how to fix this, I'll kill you, and then Red Onslaught happened, so it didn't work out so great. The spell actually succeeded, but kind of backfired in that many other heroes and villains within a certain radius also got hit with the spell unintentionally. Oops. And friends, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, may I recommend that you check out our latest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 8, Hydra Cap. Hydra Cap is definitely a pretty bad thing that happened for the Avengers in, well, in many regards. One, Hydra Captain America is literally another version of Captain America who for a while we actually thought was the main continuity version for real. So we're not off to a great start with that. Number 2, the Avengers failed to stop Hydra's Supreme Cap from taking over the US. Number 3, some of the Avengers were even manipulated into joining Hydra and Hydra Cap's forces. Some of them were actually like possessed, and some of them were just kind of made to do so. All around, it was just a rough time and not a great look for the Avengers overall. I'm actually surprised there isn't more pushback from the public today as a result of this one. Number 7, Iron Man joins Kang. Yeesh, the crossing. What a weird crossover event. Every time I think I'm over it, we come up with a list topic where I kind of can't help but like return to it. In this event, Iron Man, one of the main Avengers, was revealed to be secretly one of the baddest of the bad, as we learned that Iron Man had actually been working for Kang, or rather Kang's Immortus version, for years. That's right, it turns out that Iron Man is actually a sleeper agent for Kang, or he was. He kind of still is, because he kind of got reconciled into one being, but it's still the old Iron Man. Anyways, as weird as it sounds, this was actually an even worse weirdness than Captain America working for Hydra in my mind. At least that made more sense to me. Iron Man would fight against the Avengers, and when they struggled to defeat him, they called in a past version of himself for him to beat and almost kill. Number 6, Final Fight. When the Earth was threatened by incursions during the events of Time Runs Out, what did the Avengers do? Save the day? Try to stop those incursions? Not exactly. Captain America had once been a member of the Illuminati, the secret group of heroes who banded together to resolve ideally all of Earth's problems without anyone actually even knowing. A group of superpowered intellectual, philosophical, and moral geniuses. At least, that's what they thought. When the incursions were discovered to be a threat, and the majority of the group felt that it was important to consider the possibility that they'd maybe need to destroy other worlds to sort of save themselves from it, Captain America fought vehemently against that idea. As such, his mind was wiped, and he was decidedly ejected from the group. When he regained his memories, rather than use the Avengers to fight against the incursions and find a way to stop them, he actually spent the last bit of time before the multiverse was to end hunting down the Illuminati and in a toe-to-toe battle with Iron Man. Number 5. Create the Illuminati. Sometimes it only takes one Avenger to mess up everything for all of us. And that's kind of what happened when Tony Stark, aka Iron Man of the Avengers, decided to bring together the secret superhero group known as the Illuminati. Like I said, this wasn't the combined effort of the Avengers, but when you think about the Avengers now and even before, Tony has been a staple of that team for a very long time. And the Illuminati was really his genius idea. The Illuminati as a group have definitely caused more trouble than they're worth, causing a lot more problems in the cosmos than they've actually solved. Playing a key role in the end of the multiverse during Time Runs Out when they couldn't save the world, helping to cause Secret Invasion and World War Hulk as well. So yeah.
At number 4 we have Stingray. This guy isn't ever really a true member of the Avengers. He is officially, but he only seems to jump on as part of the group when they need him, like when they need access to his underwater hydro base or when an inverted Doctor Doom brings him on to rescue civilians from a river. He's sort of their fringe friend that they use for water related issues. Could this be a case of lazy writing? Perhaps. But it seems more like he's not really a strong enough character to do much more than pop in and out of the scene when water gets involved. He also almost fights Iron Man due to a misunderstanding right when he joins the team, and even campaigns to have him removed from the Avengers, which is just an awful way to start. At number 3 is Star Fox. This guy is just a bad hero. He's not even really a hero. His powers are extremely problematic in that he can basically gain the love of a woman on command. But it's not really love because it's artificial and it only lasts for so long. So when he uses his powers, these women often wake up not knowing where they are or what they've done, which is naturally a pretty deplorable thing to inflict on a person with your powers. And he doesn't even seem to feel badly after it either. He just gets his clothes on and jumps out the window like, "See you later, good luck piecing together the last 12 hours. Otherwise known as Eros of Titan, this guy is actually Thanos' older brother, so this sort of explains the evil nature of his powers. At least in the comics they're kind of aware of his nasty nature, because the woman who he's used his powers on eventually come out and sue him because of what he does, which has to be a first for a superhero. I'm honestly just surprised that this dude even had a membership to the Avengers in the first place. He just kind of sucks. At number 2 is D-Man, or Demolition Man. This dude should never really have been brought on to join the Avengers. He's sort of just this unmotivated, scraggly guy with a horribly designed suit. He just steals Wolverine's and Daredevil's costumes and makes a tragic mashup of the two. His origins are that he's basically a wrestler that was given superhuman strength before befriending Captain America. When Cap needs to reform the Avengers, he thinks it's a good idea to bring on D-Man to join the team. But this choice is pretty obviously out of sympathy for the guy, because he doesn't really do much when he does join. He's then sort of left behind and lost in time, becoming more and more unmotivated as the years go on, eventually living in homelessness before becoming a sort of villain. Not the best track record for even an alum of the Avengers. But I can't totally rag on him. The Avengers have insanely high standards, and some people just want to hang out and eat sub sandwiches. So that's D-Man. The number 1 spot on this list goes to Dr. Druid. Having been trained under the same mentor who trained Doctor Strange, you'd think this guy would have gone on to be a great member of the Avengers. Well, at first he wasn't actually known as such a bad hero by his own right, but after joining the team, it becomes pretty obvious that he wasn't destined for greatness. His attitude is arrogant, he carries a lot of insecurity about living in Strange's shadow for so long, and he also has a big weakness to the charm of women, proving him to have a pretty low emotional intelligence. And this is a pretty major fault when you're supposed to be an Avenger, because you need to be able to have a strong character regardless of whatever your power set is. This also tends to lead him to be a subordinate to women in positions of power, like Captain Marvel, who he continually undermines until his disloyalty leads to her being seriously injured in battle. He then tries to convince everyone to name him the successor as the new chairman. This guy, Dr. Druid, was just kind of a weak-minded fool who was conniving and subordinate through and through. It's surprising he was ever brought on board with the Avengers, because he really proves himself to be one of their weakest links while he's there. At number 10, we have Sandman. Although his redemption arc is really great and has so much potential, it sort of falls flat. Basically, the Thing one day sits Sandman down and tries to turn him to the good side, And it works. With Sandman now finding his stride as a hero, he first joins the Outlaws, a team of reformed Spider-Man enemies, and is then given a membership to the Avengers. It's all going in the right direction for the former villain until he's promptly hypnotized by Wizard and turned back to the dark side. Honestly, this isn't even Sandman's fault, but his quick turn back to evil gets in the way of him being anything close to a functional member of the Avengers. I almost didn't even put him on the list just because he barely even does anything for the team after he's inducted. And even tragically after that, he even goes off to reform the Sinister Six right after leaving the Avengers Reserve, which basically erases any good he may have done during his time as an Avenger. At number 9, we have Justice, FKA Marvel Boy. Although he's known as a pretty well-respected hero, at least in his later years, Justice still doesn't do much for the Avengers during his time with them. When he first joins, he comes off as more of a fan than anything else, making some rookie mistakes right off the bat. He also finds a way to break his leg, which isn't very common for a superhero. Much of his lack of maturity in the group is due to his worship for the other members of the Avengers, so it's hard to blame him, although he does do some pretty good work in planning to take down Ultron. Later, he ends up teaching for the Avengers Academy alongside Hank Pym, Tigra, Quicksilver, and Speedball. But overall, this character's time with the Avengers is wrought with scattered accomplishments and distracting love triangle storylines that just make him a much less effective member of the team. At number 8 is Sentry, who joins the Mighty Avengers after having one foot in the door of the New Avengers for a while. This guy is a poor addition to the team simply based on issues of power imbalance and, unfortunately, his own mental health. On the power side of things, he's so powerful that he sort of drowns out the efforts of the Avengers as a team, which in many ways is a good problem to have. But on top of this, due to his mental health issues, he tends to have trouble reining in his power set and often second guesses himself. I feel badly for the Sentry, and I only put him on this list because sometimes people just aren't right for a big team. When it becomes clear that Sentry is fighting some internal battles, he is still known as the most powerful member of the team, but just needs to figure himself out first. For example, at one point, Sentry attacks Ultron at a moment when the team needed him to hold back, and sort of ruins the whole plan. Although the attack was in retaliation for Ultron seemingly killing his wife, so it's not that unexpected. It's just one of the many times that Sentry has troubles keeping his composure and taking on the responsibilities of an Avenger. He's not a bad hero, just maybe not right for the best superhero alliance ever created. At number 7, we have US Agent, or John Walker. Formerly a stand-in for Captain America, his true colors show when Steve Rogers returns and Walker is renamed US Agent, which is just a bunko name if you ask me. I had to put him on the list even though he does the honorable deed of taking over as Captain America when Steve Rogers goes AWOL and becomes Nomad. He's just a little too intense on the patriotism front and brings the team down as a result. A huge part of Steve Rogers' influence on the Avengers is his ability to shelve the burden of America's unofficial but basically official superhero and keep his intentions focused on acting in favor of others. He's able to put aside his pride and work for the team, whereas Walker does the opposite. He does work for the team, but it's a big lesson in the importance of good attitude because they have the same powers, but something about John Walker's suffocating patriotism and inherent arrogance that comes with it just proves that no one could do the job like Steve could. And once again, US Agent is just such a lame name to take on, unrelated. Especially after having gone as Captain America for a time, it's just, maybe I just feel badly for him in a way. At number 6, we have Swordsman. With the biggest accolade being that he trains Hawkeye, it's hard not to squeeze this guy onto the list. Basically, Swordsman starts off as a circus performer who is known for demonstrating his mastery with bladed weaponry. He was more of a showman than a superhero realistically, and also more of a villain than a superhero if we're being honest. After losing all his money due to his gambling addiction, he decides to steal from the carnival paymaster, and when a young Hawkeye chases him, Swordsman almost kills his own apprentice. And then, fast forwarding, the way that he's eventually admitted into the Avengers is basically through fraud. He teams up with Mandarin and sends a fake message posing as Iron Man to the Avengers to allow himself into the group, and it works. Being a double agent for Mandarin, he later lures the Avengers into a bomb with the intention of blowing them up. Although he does try to dismantle it in a moment of regret, he's still dejected from the Avengers anyway. I think they just sensed he was screwing around with them. He then basically just falls back into a life of crime while picking up a drinking habit along the way. which isn't part of the reason I put him on the list. This is kind of sad. He's a very troubled character and just had some nasty intentions and tendencies. Not the most noble of the Avengers by any means. At number 5 we have Jack of Hearts. This guy is notoriously one of the worst Avengers because his most notable act as part of the team is murdering another one of the members. Although he does this while under the influence of Scarlet Witch, there's no hiding from something so brutal. I mean, the Avenger he kills is Ant-Man, who's a really important member of the team. Aside from this though, Jack of Hearts also just spends such a short time with the Avengers that even his heroic deeds are sort of weak, regardless of the tragedy. Being the 52nd member of the Avengers, he's brought on specifically to help take on Kang the Conqueror. They all team up with the Justice League and a huge battle goes down. And then promptly after this, Jack tragically decides he needs to end his own life for various reasons, taking a villain with him who had killed Ant-Man's daughter. But it's pretty ironic that the next time he makes an appearance, he blows himself up and takes Ant-Man with him. Just a messy run as an Avenger through and through.
Number 4, Civil War II. Even worse by far than Civil War I was its follow-up, Civil War II. In this story, we got more infighting, but for less logical reasons. This time, it was Iron Man versus Captain Marvel, because I guess Iron Man just really needs to like duke it out with all the captains. This one is one we can also likely more blame on the behind the scenes, as Marvel was definitely aiming to capitalize on Civil War I's success with this follow-up, but it just didn't work out too well because Civil War II didn't really make a lot of sense for most readers. But in terms of the canon, Carol, I think, was hands down to blame here for just being, well, unreasonably aggressive on the matter that was up for debate. Whether or not to let Inhuman Ulysses, a precog, predict the future and then based on those predictions stop future criminals from committing future crimes before of course they even happen. Yeah, and I say that as a Captain Marvel fan. I'm a big Carol Danvers fan, but this one was pretty one-sided in my mind. Even I am like, I think Carol was wrong and Tony was right. And I don't say that very often. Number 3, Avengers Disassembled. Avengers Disassembled was a story arc where the Avengers essentially imploded. What had really happened was Wanda had learned of the secret being kept from her, that she'd had fake children, which she'd in essence kinda made, who had been taken from her and then wiped from her mind by Agatha Harkness. Now, Wanda didn't like that too much, and in essence turned against Agatha, killing her before turning on her friends and colleagues, causing them to lose control, attack one another, and sicking reality warped versions basically of like Vision and dead Avengers on them. Not only did the Avengers hurt one another, but they were made to do so by one of their own, and likely were even somewhat responsible for Wanda getting to a point where she decided to turn on them. So really, who's to blame here? Is it Wanda or is it the Avengers? Or is it kind of everybody? Number 2, ignoring Scarlet Witch. Avengers Disassembled was bad, but likely what was worse was that it kind of could all have been avoided if the rest of the team had simply, I don't know, cared more about their teammate and friend, Wanda. Scarlet Witch had a lot happen to her, and although this is of course superhero comics where every day that you're alive there's a threat of trauma or, you know, of the world ending, or both, there had been many signs that Wanda was not in a good place. Rather than do something about it or, you know, attempt to, I don't know, get her help, mainly the Avengers just went on as though everything was fine. I mean, I know they all each have a lot individually going on, but come on guys, if you have someone with reality warping powers on your team and they are using those powers to create fake children which then disappear without a trace after they also lose their life partner thanks to them basically being taken apart, mind wiped, and rebuilt as a blank slate without emotion, you might think to offer them some help, or, you know, at least check in to see like if they need anything, if they need a hug or a conversation. I'm not blaming them for what Wanda did, but I would at least like to hold them accountable for being pretty much awful friends to her in her time of need. Number 1, no more mutants. Probably one of the worst things that at least one of the Avengers did was to threaten all of the mutant kind's existence with just, you know, a few words. Although admittedly, this wasn't so much Wanda's fault as it was Marvel's, who of course needed some reason to get rid of mutants for a bit because, you know, they'd sold the rights away and they weren't really profiting as much from comics involving mutants at that time, and they simply had too many of them. But reasoning behind the story aside, during House of M, Wanda in the end struck out at all mutants because her father, she felt, was more obsessed with fighting for mutant rights than he was with his actual own flesh and blood family. Although we'd later learn that Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver weren't even really like flesh and blood family. To begin with, part of the reason that Wanda suffered the mental break, which caused House of M and later M Day, had to do with the fact that her friends and Avengers didn't seem to notice or perhaps care than Wanda was suffering as a result of losing her children. And in fact, let us not forget that Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, of the Avengers, was also the one who even kind of like caused Wanda to remember her kids to begin with. She kind of spilled those beans. So whose fault was M-Day really in the end? It was still Wanda's. Wanda was the one that said the words, so it's still her fault. But Janet was the